Thank you. Actually, I think I'll start with the continuation of the counterintuitive theme. So golf, one of the G's, is highly counterintuitive, right? Anyone here play golf knows that, to get the ball to go up, you got to hit down, counterintuitive. And to make it go far, you got to hit it less harder. So very counterintuitive. In fact, this theme will continue into what the topic is also about today. I'm not going to pitch Vena. And the main thing that I wanted to really talk about was leadership. And I was thinking about, what in leadership is something that everyone can learn from, including myself. I went to a course at Stanford on this very topic, authentic leadership, and was quite amazed at what I was able to learn from my peers there. But what is authentic leadership? So why vulnerability may be your biggest strength. So how could something where you show your weakness be really something that's powerful? How can you get people to embrace that culture in your organization? And that's really what I wanted to share with you. And this is something that we do at Vena. We're very conscious of our culture there in terms of how we lead. And I think, having this type of culture in a leadership environment, and right through the entire company, really has been a big part of our success as we've built this great organization. As I mentioned, over 200 employees in 6 years in Liberty Village. So what is authentic leadership? So it's leading with confidence and strength, as I mentioned, but also by recognizing what your vulnerabilities and weaknesses are, and making sure that you can share those with your peers, your subordinates, people that report to you, people that you might report to, and also just gaining that kind of mindset within an organization. So really placed a lot of value on authenticity, honesty, and empathy. And so I think we were talking. I think Jordan, you mentioned with workplace environments where there's transparency and less complicitness, if you will, or people willing to stand up for something that they see is wrong. This type of leadership and culture in an organization is a better, I think, framework for that type of certainly that type of dialogue that can happen. And so what is EQ? Anyone know what EQ is here? Yeah, emotional intelligence. Okay, so knowing that one thing I really believe is that EQ is equal to or greater than IQ. My background is sales, and so in sales, if you want to convince someone to buy something from you, you better have some level of emotional intelligence to connect with that person, to convince them that your product or service is something that they want to buy. And so I learned this early on. That, and also the fact that, as someone mentioned, I dropped out of school to start a rock band. That was also because I didn't have the IQ to get into into a really good university. But actually, I did get into a university, and I did finally finish my degree. But if you look at leadership around, this whole thing around not being the smartest person in the room. And recognizing that and hiring and surrounding yourself with people that can support you in terms of, any gaps that you might have. And, being able to admit that you have those gaps. When we started Vena, there's 3 of us co-founders. I was the salesperson, we had a technical person, we had a product person. And I'll tell you right now, I definitely was not the product or technical person, and I recognized that. And I gave way to my co-founders to really lead that part of the business. Similarly, they recognized that they didn't really have the sales background, and they were able to give way to that. So we all recognize our strengths and our weaknesses, and we really are able to work better together that way. So the results of having a framework or an environment or culture of authentic leadership is going to mean that you have likely stronger teams that are able to work really well together, because again, recognizing those gaps in your skills and making sure you have people that can fill those on your team. Stronger relationships, so honest, open relationships where the people trust. Trust is the big factor here, right? Building trust so that you really can build great organizations and teams where you feel like you're not going to get let down. And all of that is going to result in stronger companies, right? So stronger teams and relationships, customers, staff, and partners for life that will really, see through the bullshit, right? And that's what really authentic leadership is going to, I think, give everyone an opportunity to build great teams, whether you're working as a department manager, a CEO, or a C-level exec in a company. This is really something that I believe strongly in. So with that said, I think I just hit the 00s on my clock. I'll take questions from anyone on this. Yep, back there. Okay.
Thank you. Just as the leader of a company and building your own business, you've grown to, I think they said, about 200 employees now. How important has diversity been in building that team as a strong leader?
Diversity is really important. We actually, if I think about, different kinds of diversity, if you think about, ethnic diversity or, gender diversity, I think for Vena, I think in Toronto, all companies have, ethnic diversity. So I think that's not really a challenge for us in Toronto. I think one of the things that we do place value on is we have 2 women in our 5-person C-suite. And so that is really, for us, critically important to have that balance of the way that women think differently than men in terms of their ideas. So very important.
I just want to go back to the EQ. Do you incorporate any personal development growth or EQ growth or learning in your company and position? Do you give like a public company time away to go develop yourself? Is that something encouraged that you?
We do. Well, we have different, what we have right now is leadership training. We use the DISC framework. Are you familiar with that? DISC? DISC framework is a framework. It's really like, it's behavioral personality and character profiling, but it's really driven on behavioral how would you behave in a certain situation, okay? And so there's 4 different types of profiles. And so like dominant being one, influencer being another, steadiness and compliance are I think the other 2. So understanding what other people's profiles are in terms of how they behave in certain situations is one framework of learning that we do provide all of our leaders at Vena. So that's one example of, I think that's the beginning of having an authentic leadership type environment is really, if you don't know your strengths and weaknesses or how people might react in a certain situation, it's really hard to really execute on this.
Hey Don, I'm wondering as you've seen some substantial growth at Vena,
Yep.
and I assume that that's also posed some challenges for you in growth as a leader. So I'm wondering if you could comment as to some of the challenges you've faced as the company scaled and new expectations have been thrust on you.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for us in scaling the business is going from founder-led to really a professional executive team-led business. I think that would be probably the biggest scaling challenge that we have at 200 people. As we look to go to 500 people now, I think that's really, the founders did everything initially. Like there were only 3 of us that started the company at Starbucks back in 2011. But then obviously as we hired and grew, and now with our latest round of funding, we were able to hire a full complement of a C-suite of executives to run the business and operate the business. I actually have a COO now who pretty much runs a lot of the operational side of of our business. And so I think that would be one of our challenges that we have, but that's how we've met that challenge, by hiring great people. Is that Colin back there with the hands up? Hey, Colin.
Save the best for last. Last question.
Okay. Yeah, how do you hire or keep our culture going is a bit of the question here. So I think, again, it is, culture isn't something it almost is a subconscious thing, right? I think when you have leaders who, thankfully my co-founders and I think alike in terms of the culture that we wanted at Vena, which is a very transparent environment, a very inclusive environment where everyone really is part of the Vena, DNA. So once we now believe we've established that, I think keeping that going is making sure we don't hire any assholes. If I can put it in any other way, right? And that's something that we say that. I've been published saying that. So we don't hire assholes. There you go.